Imagine a room where 6 guns are already decided and one man refuses to notice them. February 7, 1958, Harlem, West 126th Street, early evening. The light outside is fading, but inside the apartment, the bulbs burn too bright, too exposed. A coffee cup sits untouched on the table, steam long gone. A folded New York-Amsterdam News rests beside it, headline, creased by habit. 6 men enter first, coats heavy, hands never fully visible. They spread out the way men do when they expect violence to solve things quickly. Then Bumpy Johnson steps in. He does not reach for a chair. He does not scan for exits. He does not acknowledge the guns. That is the first mistake they make, assuming panic arrives loudly. Outside, a bus exhales at the corner. Somewhere downstairs, a radio murmurs jazz through a wall. Inside the room, one of the men clears his throat. Another adjusts his grip metal, whispering against wool. The plan is simple: intimidate, corner, finish. Harlem has seen this choreography before. In 1958 alone, police records would later count 137 armed confrontations tied to organized crime north of Central Park. Most ended in blood. Some ended in funerals that lasted all day. This one does not begin that way. Bumpy looks at the coffee cup, then at the newspaper. Only then does he lift his eyes. If you value stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps preserve forgotten chapters of history. Tell us your local time and where you're watching from in the comments. The calculation does not happen in Bumpy Johnson's face. It happens behind his eyes. February 7th, 1958, 6:18 p.m. The apartment smells faintly of burnt coffee and winter coats damp from sleet. One man stands near the window, another blocks the hallway. 2 more hover too close to the table. Their spacing is wrong, too tight. Men who expect shooting, not thinking. Bumpy Johnson notices everything without moving his head. He counts hands first. 6 men, 4 guns visible. 2 concealed, the kind that print through fabric when the owner is nervous. He notes who avoids eye contact, who blinks too often, who hasn't stopped shifting his weight. Experience has taught him a quiet truth: the most dangerous man in the room is rarely the one gripping the gun hardest. Bumpy sets his hat down carefully, not as a gesture of peace, as a measurement of time. In the 1950s, Harlem saw an average of 1 organized crime-related shooting every 53 hours, according to NYPD internal tallies later declassified. Most began exactly like this: armed men, enclosed space, pressure rising fast. Survivors remembered the noise, the shots, the panic, the mistakes. Bumpy does something else. He sits. The chair creaks. Too loud. One of the men flinches. Another's jaw tightens. They were expecting shouting, or bargaining, or fear. Instead, they get posture, calm, a man placing himself at the center of gravity. A folded notebook rests near the ashtray, confiscated earlier that week from a numbers runner who talked too much. Bumpy doesn't open it. He doesn't need to. He already knows who sent these men. He knows the math behind it: territory percentages, disrespect disguised as business. He also knows this room favors him. 2 exits, 1 hallway too narrow for coordinated fire, 1 window facing the street useless unless someone wants witnesses. The guns are real. The threat is real. But the moment belongs to whoever forces the next move. And Bumpy does not move. The silence stretches, 10 seconds, 15. In situations like this, police psychologists would later note heart rates spike by an average of 38% after 12 seconds of unresolved threat. The men feel it. Harlem does not announce its rules. It teaches them quietly and only once. February 7th, 1958, still West 126th Street. Outside, dusk settles into night neon signs beginning their tired hum. Inside the apartment, the men realize something has gone wrong. Not tactically, culturally. Bumpy Johnson finally speaks, but not to the guns. He asks who poured the coffee. It is not a joke. It is not small talk. It is a test. One man answers too quickly. Another laughs, then stops when no one joins him. In Harlem, rushed words mean fear. Laughter at the wrong moment means you don't belong. Bumpy listens the way some men read contracts for what is missing. By the late 1950s, Harlem's underground economy moved an estimated $20–25 million a year through numbers clubs and protection, nearly all of it regulated by personal reputation, not written agreements. Violence existed, but it was inefficient, public, bad for business. The real enforcement was memory. Who froze? Who broke? Who stayed calm when they were meant to beg? The crew does not know this. They come from elsewhere: Brooklyn, maybe the Bronx. Places where guns speak first. Here, silence does. Bumpy stands and walks to the window, slowly. No one stops him. That is another mistake. On the sill sits a small object, a matchbook from the Teresa Hotel, folded flat, used earlier as a bookmark. He turns it once between his fingers the way a man handles something familiar. He reminds them without raising his voice that no one in this room is from this block, that neighbors here recognize footsteps, that police response times in Harlem average 4 minutes faster when shots are fired near residential buildings with prior complaints. He does not threaten, he informs. A silent look passes between two of the men. Not agreement, calculation. Outside a car backfires, every hand tightens. No one fires. The guns are still pointed, but the power has shifted. The matchbook goes back on the sill, unlit. Time slows when instinct is denied. February 7, 1958. 6:27 p.m. The room has not changed, but the air has. Sweat gathers at the base of collars. A radiator clicks on, then off. Somewhere in the building, a door slams. No one inside flinches now, they are past that stage. This is the moment violence is supposed to happen. Bumpy Johnson turns back from the window and does something that feels wrong to everyone holding a gun. He asks them to sit. One chair scrapes the floor before its owner thinks better of it. Another man stays standing, knees locked, weapon angled, just enough to be disrespectful. Bumpy notices. He files it away. The room is a ledger now, every gesture and entry. In 1958, informants later told federal investigators that fewer than 1 in 5 armed confrontations between organized crews ended in immediate gunfire when one side refused escalation. Those were the dangerous ones the encounters remembered, repeated, mythologized. This is becoming one of them. Bumpy speaks plainly. Not about territory, not about money. He talks about timing, about how noise travels in winter, about how ambulances get stuck on Lenox Avenue when snow narrows the lanes. He mentions almost casually that St. Nicholas Park is 2 blocks away and that funerals there tend to draw crowds when men die without explanation. A folded handkerchief appears in his palm. He dabs his forehead. A small human gesture. Not fear, maintenance. The crew leader finally interrupts. His voice cracks on the second sentence. He insists about this isn't personal. Business only. The phrase lands dead on the floor. Everyone in Harlem knows that line. It usually precedes regret. Bumpy lets the silence answer for him. He does not threaten retaliation. He does not promise mercy. He states a single fact: if a gun goes off in this room, every man here will be identified by mourning, by neighbors, by bartenders, by women watching from stoops who never forget faces. Harlem's memory, he reminds them, is longer than prison sentences. He sits back down. The decision has been made. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. Fear changes sides quietly and then all at once. February 7th, 1958, 6:34 p.m. The guns are still out, but no one is aiming anymore. Not deliberately, not confidently. One man's finger slips off the trigger and rests along the frame, an unconscious surrender taught by instinct, not training. Bumpy Johnson notices first. He leans forward just enough to be felt. The table between them carries small signs of normal life, a ring left by a coffee cup, a crease in the newspaper where someone once folded it while thinking. Ordinary objects, untouched. The kind of details men remember later when they try to explain why nothing happened. By the late 1950s, sociologists studying organized crime would note that reputation-based deterrence reduced retaliatory violence by nearly 40% in tightly knit neighborhoods compared to areas ruled purely by force. Harlem was such a place. The men across from Bumpy feel it now, the invisible pressure of a community that watches, remembers, and decides who belongs. One of them swallows hard. Another looks toward the door, then away as if embarrassed by the impulse. The leader finally lowers his weapon a fraction, not enough to admit defeat, enough to admit doubt. Bumpy speaks again, softer than before. He tells them they came expecting panic, noise, a sudden move that would justify pulling the trigger. Instead, they found stillness. And stillness, he reminds them, is dangerous because it leaves no excuse. He asks them a question, not rhetorical, not threatening. Simple. Who sent you? No one answers. Another question hangs unspoken but heavy, and now it belongs to you. When 6 armed men hesitate, who truly controls the room, the ones holding the guns, or the one who never needed to reach for one? The silence stretches. A car passes outside. Footsteps fade on the stairs. Finally, a gun lowers completely. The first one. What follows restraint is never relief, it is accounting. February 7th, 1958, 6:41 p.m. The door closes behind the last man with a sound that is almost polite. No threats shouted down the hallway, no promises of revenge, just footsteps descending slower than when they arrived. Outside, Harlem resumes its rhythm as if nothing exceptional has occurred. Inside, Bumpy Johnson remains seated. Only now does he exhale. He reaches for the coffee cup at last. It is cold. He drinks it anyway. A small punishment for a decision that will echo far beyond this room. On the table, the folded newspaper slides open slightly, revealing a column about a shooting in Queens, 3 dead, 2 wounded. The numbers matter. In 1958, New York City would record over 1,100 firearm-related assaults, most traced back to impulsive escalation. Tonight avoided becoming one of them. That avoidance will cost him, because restraint is remembered. Within 48 hours, word spreads. Not the full story, never that, but the shape of it. That a crew came armed, that they left untouched, that no one raised their voice. In the underworld, such stories alter behavior. Informants later told federal agents that after incidents like this, territorial challenges dropped by nearly 30% for the men involved. Fear once redirected tends to stay put, but there is a quieter consequence. Bumpy stands alone by the window. He watches a patrol car idle at the corner longer than usual. He knows what calm attracts attention. Authority dislikes order it did not impose. Power that does not announce itself invites scrutiny. He straightens the chairs, picks up the matchbook, slips it into his pocket unlit. A souvenir not of victory but of balance narrowly maintained. Here's the question the night leaves behind, and it is not comfortable. When you refuse violence and still win, who starts watching you more closely, your enemies or the people sworn to stop them? The lights stay on, the room stays intact, but sleep will not come easily again. Years later, the guns are easier to forget than the quiet. Harlem changes, slowly at first, then all at once. Buildings replaced, corners renamed. Men who once carried weight reduced to names in ledgers or rumors told badly by people who weren't there. But February 7, 1958 survives not as a headline, not as a police report, but as a pause remembered by those who understood what almost happened. Bumpy Johnson never spoke publicly about that night. He didn't need to. In neighborhoods like Harlem, silence is archival. It preserves meaning better than testimony. By the early 1960s, federal surveillance files would note a measurable shift, fewer direct challenges, more intermediaries, more caution. Power had changed shape, not grown louder, grown heavier. A former numbers runner would later tell a journalist off the record that men stopped bringing guns into rooms with Bumpy after that winter, not because they feared being shot, because they feared being seen, being measured, being remembered in the wrong way. The apartment on West 26th Street is gone now. Renovated, repainted. Someone else drinks coffee where the table once stood, but the memory lingers in small symbolic fragments like the unlit matchbook Bumpy kept for years according to those close to him. He never struck it, never threw it away. A reminder that fire is most powerful when it stays potential. There is no dramatic ending to nights like that. No bodies, no sirens, just an understanding quietly rewritten. History often celebrates violence because it leaves evidence, but restraint leaves something harder to erase: altered behavior. Changed calculations. Rooms where guns stay holstered because once long ago they were not needed. That is the real aftermath. Not what happened in the room, but what never had to happen again. History rarely remembers the moments when nothing happens. No gunshot, no scream, no body on the floor. Yet those moments are often the ones that bend the future most quietly and most permanently. On a winter evening in 1958, a room in Harlem did not explode the way everyone expected. Instead, it absorbed pressure. It held it. And in doing so, it revealed something fragile about power, that it is not always proven by force, but sometimes by the refusal to use it when every rule suggests you should. Bumpy Johnson understood that violence creates witnesses, but restraint creates memory. Guns end arguments. Silence ends ambitions. What happened on West 126th Street was not a victory in the traditional sense, it was a recalibration. Men walked out carrying their lives, but also carrying doubt. And doubt, once planted, grows faster than fear. Years later, long after the apartment vanished and the streets learned new rhythms, the story survived not because it was told loudly, but because it was told carefully, in lowered voices, in unfinished sentences, in the way certain men chose not to knock on certain doors. This is how legends really form, not through spectacle, but through inevitability, through moments where the outcome feels decided long before anyone dares to name it, where history turns not on action, but on restraint measured in seconds and glances and unlit matches. We like to imagine the past as louder than it was, more dramatic, more final. But sometimes the weight of history rests on a man sitting still, letting others realize they have already lost something they cannot get back. The room stayed intact, the city kept breathing, and the lesson lingered.